I told myself I would keep walking. I told myself mercy was a habit that got people killed. The coins hit the auction table hard enough to scatter dust, 3 months' wages ringing louder than the laughter that had already decided her worth. A woman stood barefoot on the wood, too old for the crowd, holding a child who had learned to stay quiet when fear passed close. By morning, the town would call it charity. By nightfall, someone would whisper about fire. He didn't buy her. He cut the rope and said she could choose. That choice would drag them through locked doors, rebuilt fences, a threat that smelled like oil, and a fall from a barn loft that almost finished what winter had started. Before spring, a second knock would come in the dark, and the law would finally learn how loud daylight can be. But right there, as the money settled and the crowd leaned in, one thing was wrong. The ledger on the table carried a seal set just a little too far left. Stay with this story to the very end. Subscribe for more Western love tales, and tell us, what city are you watching from? Dawn came quiet, like it was trying not to wake anything that had survived the night. Silas Boone was already outside, tamping down the last smoking edge of the barn wall. The boards were blackened, but the frame held. He pressed his palm to the wood and felt it, warm, alive, good enough to stand, good enough to fix. Inside the house, Clara measured the baby's breathing again. Not with panic, with practice. She adjusted the blanket, loosened it a finger's width, and waited. The baby settled. Elsie watched, solemn as a sentry, the lantern planted between her knees. "She's stronger," Elsie said. "She is," Clara answered, "because you kept watch." A knock came at the door. 1, 2, 3. Not fear this time. Habit. Silas opened it to Sheriff Rusk and Deputy Vane. The deputy's hat was off. His hair was still damp from sweat, not snow. "We found the rest," Rusk said. Silas stepped aside. They laid it out on the table, bottles with the same smell as the broken one, rags, a ledger pulled from under a loose board at the saloon. The pages were thick with ink and numbers, names written and crossed out. "Fuel deliveries," Rusk said. "Paid for with credit, not boons." Silas didn't touch the book. Clara did. She turned the pages carefully, eyes moving faster than they had any right to after the night she'd had. She stopped, tapped a line with her finger. "Here," she said. "And here. These 2 entries don't match the hand above them." Rusk leaned closer. "You sure?" "Yes," she said. "Pressure and slant. Whoever wrote these was copying." The deputy swallowed. "Copying who?" Clara closed the ledger. "Someone who signs where he doesn't stand." Rusk exhaled through his nose. "That'll do." He looked at Silas. "There'll be a hearing." "When?" Silas asked. "Today," Rusk said. "Before the story changes again." They left as quickly as they'd come. Silas went back to the barn with a hammer and a pocket of nails. He worked without hurry, setting boards where fire had licked, driving iron into wood until the sound rang clean. Each strike was an answer to something he didn't say. Clara bundled the baby and pulled on her coat. She paused at the iron box, then tucked the sealed letter inside her own bag. "You don't have to come," Silas said when he saw her at the door. "I do," she replied. "Not to speak, to stand. Elsie reached for the lantern. "I'll carry it." Silas hesitated, then nodded. "You know how." The walk into town felt different. The ridge didn't press them back. Doors opened as they passed. Some faces turned away. Some nodded. One man lifted his hat and kept it lifted until they were gone. The sheriff's office was too small for the people who wanted inside. Rusk set chairs against the wall and left the door open. Cold air crept in, honest and sharp. Cyrus Dempsey stood near the window, hands folded, expression set like he'd practiced it. He smiled when he saw Clara. "You came," he said. "Brave." She did not answer. Rusk called the room to order. He spoke plain, about the fire, the fuel, the letter with the wrong seal. He asked for the ledger. The deputy set it down. Cyrus laughed once. "You'll take the word of a woman hiding in a man's house over mine?" Rusk didn't look at him. "I'll take evidence." He turned to Clara. "You said you recognized the seal." She stepped forward, lantern light catching the wax as she held the paper up. "This was pressed twice. Whoever sealed it hesitated. Binding documents don't hesitate." Cyrus shrugged. "Wax melts." "Not like that," Clara said, "and not with that mark." She angled the paper. A nick showed at the edge, small but unmistakable. The room leaned in. Rusk nodded to the deputy. "Bring the ring." Deputy Vane produced it from a cloth. A heavy thing. The same mark. The same hesitation, pressed into metal now instead of wax. Cyrus's smile vanished. "This is a witch hunt," he said. "You're all forgetting decency." Elsie's voice cut through, small and steady. "Decency is lighting the way back." Silence fell, thick and sudden. Rusk looked at Cyrus for a long moment. "You'll answer for the fire," he said, "and for attempting to coerce a signature under duress." Cyrus's face went red. "You owe me." Rusk's jaw tightened. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded page, creased, worn thin. "I did," he said. "Past tense." He set it on the desk. A receipt, paid in full. A murmur rippled through the room. Cyrus took a step back. "You can't." Rusk raised a hand. "I can." Deputy Vane moved. Cyrus did not resist, but his eyes burned as he passed Silas. "This isn't over," he said softly. Silas met his gaze. "It never is." Outside, the air felt cleaner, not warm, cleaner. They walked back up the ridge as the sun climbed, Elsie swinging the lantern by its handle like it weighed nothing at all. Halfway home, Silas stopped and turned toward the hill beyond the trees. He took a single white flower from his pocket, brittle, held together by faith and cold, and climbed the short rise. He knelt and set it at the base of two weathered stones. "I couldn't save you," he said quietly, "but I'm trying." He stood and went back down. Spring took its time, but it came. Snow pulled away from the fence line. The creek loosened its grip. The roof was repaired, board by board. Travelers stopped and were given coffee and a place to sleep. No questions asked. Clara set a small table by the window and taught letters to whoever showed up with a slate and patience. Elsie learned faster than the rest and helped the smaller ones, lantern set between them like a rule. One evening, As the light lingered longer than it used to, Elsie climbed the porch steps and hung the old lantern on its hook. "I'm naming it," she said. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Hope," she declared, "because it keeps coming back." Silas laughed, the sound surprised out of him. Clara watched from the doorway, the baby on her hip, and said nothing. She didn't need to. The lantern burned, not because it had to, but because someone chose to light it. And the knock at the door, when it came, was for supper. The ranch showed itself the way tired things do, without apology. Fence posts leaned like old men who'd argued too long with the wind. A gate hung by one hinge, tapping soft, patient, the sound of something waiting to be fixed. The barn roof dipped in the middle, a shallow bow pressed there by years of weather that didn't care who owned what. Jonah swung down first and took the reins from Evelyn without touching her. He tied both horses quick and clean, then moved ahead, boots crunching on frozen dirt, testing the place with his eyes. Evelyn slid down slower, careful not to jar Noah. The boy's face was gray at the edges, breath thin as a promise. She didn't look around. She went straight to the house. The door opened easy. Too easy. Jonah followed, shut it behind them, then did something small and precise. He turned the key. "Locks from the inside," he said. That was all. Evelyn nodded once. She crossed the room and laid Noah on a folded quilt near the hearth. She knelt, pressed her ear to his chest, counted the shallow rhythm, then stayed there for a beat longer than she needed. The room was plain. Table, 2 chairs, a bed in the corner with a blanket thick enough to matter. No lace, no softness that asked to be admired, just things that worked. Jonah knelt at the hearth and struck a match. The flame caught fast, bright and clean. He fed it wood, 1 stick at a time, until heat pushed back the cold. "Water's there," he said, nodding toward the pump out back. "Coffee if you want it." Evelyn didn't answer. She loosened the blue cloth around Noah, slid him closer to the fire, then pulled Jonah's coat around both of them again, careful to keep the baby's skin against hers. Outside, a horse stamped. Somewhere farther off, another answered. Jonah's head lifted. He listened. He didn't move. Jonah reached into his coat and set a small stack of bills on the table. He didn't push them toward her. He just let them be. "Week's wages," he said. "Advance." Evelyn stood. She walked to the table and split the stack in half. She slid one part back to him. "I work first," she said. "Then I take the rest." Jonah's mouth twitched, not a smile, recognition. He nodded. "Doc left you this," he said, setting down a wrapped bottle and a tin. "Milk, tonic. He says warm, not hot." Evelyn reached for the bottle, then stopped. She met Jonah's eyes. "I'll pay," she said. Jonah didn't argue. He took 1 bill from the stack and put it back where it had been, then slid the bottle across. "Fair," he said. Evelyn fed Noah slow, careful. The baby took it, breath hitching, then settled into a weak but steady rhythm. Color crept back, a thin line of life at his mouth. Doc Kent's words echoed in her head. No distance, no air. And she pressed the boy closer, skin to skin, until the fire did its work. Jonah set a kettle on the stove. He poured water. He waited. The kettle sang. He poured coffee into 2, chipped cups and set one near her without comment. Evelyn picked it up. Her hands shook once, then steadied. She took a sip and swallowed like the taste might undo her. "Thank you," she said, and it cost her. Jonah inclined his head. He didn't answer it. Night came down fast. The wind pushed at the walls, testing seams, looking for a way in. Jonah checked each window one by one, fingers firm, movements economical. He didn't hover. He didn't crowd. Evelyn laid Noah on the quilt and tucked him in close to the heat. She took a small knife from her pocket and placed it under the edge of the quilt, where her hand could find it without searching. Jonah saw. He didn't comment. He took a chair by the door and sat with his back to the wood, boots planted, hat on his knee. He watched the shadows move across the room as the fire shifted. Somewhere in the dark, a branch snapped. Evelyn's breath caught. Jonah lifted a hand. Not a warning. A promise. Minutes passed. Then more. Noah coughed. A soft, dry sound. Evelyn scooped him up and pressed him to her chest, rocking slow, humming a tune that remembered itself without asking permission. It wasn't a lullaby. It was something older. Something she'd learned before the world taught her to keep quiet. Jonah closed his eyes for half a second. Just half. A memory brushed him hard enough to hurt. I used to hear that, he thought, and then shut the thought down before it could take anything else. He stood and crossed to the hearth, careful not to step too close. You can take the bed, he said. I'll stay here. Evelyn shook her head. I sleep light, she said. He needs the heat. Jonah nodded. He stayed where he was. The wind pressed again. The door held. Evelyn checked the lock. Her fingers rested there for a moment longer than necessary. She breathed out. Jonah's voice came low, threaded through the crackle of the fire. Stay, he said. Not a plea, not a command. At least through the night. Evelyn didn't look at him. She tightened the coat around Noah and nodded once. By morning, frost traced the inside of the window like lace nobody had paid for. Jonah was already outside when Evelyn rose. She heard the pump first, the steady clank of iron, then the scrape of boots on dirt. She washed Noah's face with warmed water and wrapped him tight. When she stepped out, Jonah was at the fence, testing a post with his shoulder. It wobbled. He glanced back. I'll shore this side today, he said. Barn after. Evelyn set Noah down in a wooden crate near the sunlit wall, padded with quilts. She looked at the fence, then at the pile of posts stacked by the shed. She picked up one. Jonah straightened. Those weigh near 50. Evelyn lifted two, one on each shoulder, and walked them to the fence without breaking stride. She set them down, wiped her hands on her skirt, and waited. Jonah stared. Then something dark and sharp crossed his face. Not at her, at the years that had made her do that. I've carried heavier, she said, simply. Jonah turned away, jaw tight. He picked up the hammer and drove the first nail hard enough to sink it flush on the first strike. They worked. Wood bit back. Wire cut. Sweat gathered and ran cold down spines. Evelyn moved with the economy of someone who had learned to make effort count. Jonah adjusted without comment, matching her pace, watching where she set her feet. Noah slept, chest rising steady now. Once he stirred, and Evelyn crossed to him without thinking, hand on his back until the small body settled again. A woman appeared at the fence line. Ruth called her, shawl pulled tight, eyes sharp with curiosity that pretended to be concern. "Well," she called, "town's talking." Jonah didn't stop hammering. "Town usually does." Ruth's gaze flicked to Evelyn, then to Noah. "That yours?" Evelyn answered without looking up. "I work here," she said. "He eats here." Ruth sniffed. "And that's all?" Jonah set the hammer down. He faced Ruth, shoulders square. "That's all," he said. Ruth lingered a moment longer, then turned away, carrying the words with her like kindling. Near noon, the wind lifted a paper from the table inside and sent it skittering across the floor. Evelyn caught it before it reached the hearth. A note. Old. A seal pressed slightly off-center. Ink darker than it should have been. She read it once, then folded it and placed it back exactly where it had been, turned so the crease lined up with the grain of the wood. Jonah saw her do it. He said nothing. They ate bread and beans in the sun. Jonah poured coffee. Evelyn counted the bites Noah took and the breaths between. "I'll ride into town this afternoon," Jonah said. "Supplies. Receipts." Evelyn nodded. "I'll finish the wire." He hesitated, then nodded back. From the far ridge a shape moved where nothing should have moved. Jonah's eyes tracked it. He didn't slow. He didn't speed up. "Lord," Evelyn thought, watching his shoulders set. "We're not safe yet." The wind shifted. Somewhere, metal rang once, thin and wrong. Jonah picked up the hammer again. They kept working. By evening, one stretch of fence stood straight. Not pretty, honest. Evelyn wiped her hands and looked at it. She didn't smile. She touched the wood once, then turned back to Noah. Jonah followed her gaze. He felt the weight of the day settle into his bones. Not heavy, necessary. Christmas was 4 days off, and already the ranch was breathing again. By dawn, the frost had loosened its grip, leaving the ground damp and dark, ready to be worked. Jonah was already at the barn when Evelyn came out with Noah wrapped tight against her chest. He had stripped the broken boards from the lean side, stacking what could be saved, tossing the rest aside with a dull crack of old wood giving up. Evelyn set Noah in the crate by the wall again, sun reaching him in a narrow stripe. She checked his breath, counted. Then she turned toward the barn. Jonah tossed her a pair of gloves without asking. She caught them, slid them on, and went straight for the wire. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Hammer met nail. Wire pulled taut. Posts set deeper. The barn creaked but held. Sweat cut lines through dust on Jonah's face. Evelyn's shoulders moved steady, precise, conserving strength the way someone does when they've never been allowed to waste it. Once, Jonah reached for a beam at the same time she did. Their hands brushed, nothing more. Both pulled back at once. No apology followed. Noah cried out sharp, startled by a sudden clang. Evelyn crossed the distance in 3 strides, hand on his chest, before the sound finished echoing. "It's all right," she murmured. Not to calm him, to promise him something the world rarely kept. Jonah watched, then turned back to his work and drove the next nail harder than necessary. "I told myself I wouldn't do this again," he thought, the thought quick and unwelcome. I told myself I could live alone. The barn didn't care what he told himself. It needed fixing. Near midday, Jonah wiped his hands and pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Supplies list," he said, setting it on the crate beside Noah. "And the cost." Evelyn glanced at it, then looked up. "You're short." Jonah shrugged. "We make do." She shook her head once. She reached for a pencil stub from her pocket and flipped the paper over, writing fast and neat, numbers lining up like soldiers. "Sell 1 steer," she said. "Buy posts and wire now. You'll lose weight on the herd this winter if the fence fails. You lose the herd, you lose the land." Jonah studied the page. He hadn't expected that. Not from someone the town had weighed like flour. "You're sure?" he asked. Evelyn didn't look at him. "I don't guess," she said. "I count." Jonah folded the paper again. He nodded. "All right." He reached into his pocket and placed another bill on the crate. "Wages," he said. Evelyn hesitated, then took it. She didn't hide it. She didn't clutch it. She folded it once and tucked it away where it couldn't be mistaken for charity. "Thank you," she said. Plain. Clean. Jonah cleared his throat. "If you want," he added, careful, "we can talk about more than wages. Later." Evelyn's eyes flicked to him. Not hard. Not soft. Measuring. "We'll talk after the fence stands," she said. That was the end of it. Ruth Calder returned just after noon, this time with company. 2 women from town who carried their curiosity like baskets they meant to fill. "Well," Ruth called, leaning on the fence post that had been straightened only hours before. "Looks like you've been busy." Jonah didn't answer. He was tightening wire, muscles bunched, attention fixed on the job. Evelyn stood and faced them, Noah secure against her. "I'm paid," she said before they could ask. "Weekly," one of the women sniffed. "Paid for what?" "For work," Evelyn replied. "Same as anyone." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "And the baby?" "He eats," Evelyn said. "Like people do." Jonah set the pliers down and turned. "Anything else?" he asked. The women exchanged looks. Ruth shrugged. "Town'll say what town says." Jonah nodded. "It always does." They left with their baskets empty, but their tongues full. Evelyn watched them go. She felt the weight of eyes that weren't there yet. The ones that would come at night, when talk turned into action. "We'll need receipts," she said quietly. Jonah met her gaze. "I know." That evening, Jonah rode into town and returned before dark, saddlebags heavier, jaw set. He set the supplies inside, then placed a small ring of keys on the table. "Front door," he said. "Back, shed." Evelyn stared at them. "They're yours," Jonah added. "While you're here." Evelyn didn't touch them right away. She looked at the door, then at Noah. She picked up the keys and slipped them into her pocket. The weight settled there, unfamiliar and grounding. She checked the lock that night herself, turned it, tested it, once more, to be sure. Jonah watched from his chair by the fire and said nothing. After supper, Jonah spoke again. "If you stay through spring," he said, eyes on the flames, "I'll give you a share when we sell the stock. Not charity, a stake." Evelyn's fingers stilled on Noah's blanket. A share is ownership, she said. Yes, Jonah replied. She considered, then shook her head. I won't be owned, she said. Not by paper, not by kindness. Jonah nodded slowly. Then we don't call it that. Evelyn met his eyes. If there's more than wages, she said, it's because I earn it, and it's written, proper. Jonah breathed out. All right. She's not afraid of me, he realized. She's afraid of disappearing again. I'll go to Sheriff Rourke tomorrow, he said. Register you proper. Wages. Hours. Evelyn's shoulders eased a fraction. Good. Noah stirred, fussed, then settled when Evelyn hummed under her breath, a thin line of sound pulled straight from memory. Jonah listened, chest tight. Lord, he thought, not looking at her. Don't let me ruin this. Near midnight, Jonah rose to check the barn. The air smelled wrong. He followed it, slow and quiet, until he found the oil lamp tipped near the wall. Wick damp, a smear of dark on the dirt where it shouldn't be. Jonah knelt, touched the ground, sniffed. Oil. He straightened, eyes scanning the dark. Inside the house, Evelyn woke with a start. She rose, knife in hand, Noah tight against her, and checked the door. Locked, solid. She listened. Nothing. Then, very faint, the sound of a horse moving away. By morning, Jonah said nothing. He just moved the oil lamps farther from the walls and filled the water barrels to the brim. Evelyn watched him do it and said one thing. Someone came. Jonah nodded. Yes. They didn't ask who. They didn't need to. The ranch had taken its first breath, and somewhere beyond the fence, someone had decided it should stop. Morning came thin and gray, the kind that made a man count what he had left. Jonah stood in the feed shed with the door half open, tallying sacks with his eyes. Hay stacked lower than it should. Grain bins showing rib. He marked it all in his head without writing a thing. Winter would eat this ranch if he let it. Evelyn watched from the doorway. Noah tucked close, the baby's breath fogging the inside of her coat. She didn't wait to be asked. You're short 2 months, she said. If the cold holds... Jonah glanced back. I've held worse. You've lost worse, she replied. Not unkind, just accurate. She stepped in and lifted the lid on the grain bin, fingers brushing the edge, counting by feel. Fence first saved the herd, she continued. Now the feed saves the fence. Lose either, the land follows. Jonah's jaw tightened. I won't sell the land. I didn't say you would, Evelyn said. She shifted Noah and reached into her pocket, pulling out the folded paper from yesterday. She smoothed it on the crate and added numbers, clean and quick. Sell 1 steer now. Buy feed before prices rise. You'll feel it once, not all winter. Jonah studied the page. He hadn't thought about prices rising. He hadn't thought about sachant beyond holding the line. You learned this where? He asked. Evelyn didn't look up. By not being allowed to be wrong. She folded the paper and set it beside him. Jonah took it. He nodded. I'll write after dinner. They worked through noon, patching what the night hadn't touched. Jonah drove nails. Evelyn stretched wire. Noah slept longer now, his breath deeper, the faint wheeze gone. When the sun dipped low enough to make shadows long, Jonah spoke again. "I've been thinking," he said, careful, "about more than wages." Evelyn didn't stop working. "So have I." Jonah took a breath. "If you stay 2 years—" "No," Evelyn said at once. He paused. "Hear me." She turned then, eyes steady. "If it's years," she said, "it's a contract, and I don't sign my life away." Jonah nodded. He had expected that. "Not years then," he said. "A share when we sell. Earned." Evelyn set the pliers down. "A share makes me owned," she said. "It makes you invested," Jonah countered. "It makes me something you can lose," she replied. "And I've been lost before." Jonah swallowed. He looked at Noah, sleeping, small chest rising sure and even. "Then tell me what's fair," he said. Evelyn considered. The wind pulled at her skirt. Somewhere a crow called once and went quiet. "Wages," she said. "Written, registered. And if there's more than that, it comes after the work. Public, legal." Jonah let out a slow breath. "Sheriff Rourke." "Yes." "And receipts," Jonah added. "And witnesses," Evelyn finished. They looked at each other a moment longer. "All right," Jonah said. "Tomorrow." Ruth. Calder came again before Jonah could saddle up, this time alone. She leaned on the gate like she belonged there. "You selling stock?" Ruth asked, eyes sharp. Jonah didn't lie. "One steer," Ruth hummed. "Word travels." "So do lies," Jonah replied. Ruth's gaze slid to Evelyn. "Town says you're clever." Evelyn met her eyes. "Town says many things." Ruth sniffed. "You aiming to stay?" Evelyn didn't answer the question. She adjusted Noah's blanket instead, making sure the wind didn't reach him. Jonah stepped forward. "Anything else, Ruth?" Ruth lifted her hands. "Just thought I'd warn you. Mr. Thornton's been asking." Jonah's shoulders set. "About what?" "About who's working your land," Ruth said. "And why?" Evelyn felt the name like a pressure change. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Jonah nodded once. "Tell him to ask the sheriff." Ruth's mouth thinned. "Careful," she said. "Men like that don't ask twice." Jonah watched her go. He didn't rush to the horse. "He'll come," Evelyn said. "Yes," Jonah replied, "and he won't come clean." The sheriff's office smelled of ink and old wood. Amos Rourke sat behind his desk with his hat off, hair gone gray at the temples, eyes tired but not blind. Jonah stood straight. Evelyn stood beside him, Noah pressed close. "I want her registered as a hired hand," Jonah said. "Wages, weekly, no contract term." Amos raised a brow. "That's unusual." "So is selling people," Jonah replied. Amos looked at Evelyn. "You agree?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes." Amos pulled a ledger closer. "Name." She gave it. "Clear, full." Amos wrote it down. The scratch of the pen sounded louder than it should have. "And the child?" Amos asked. "He stays with me," Evelyn said. "No claim, no debt." Amos paused, then wrote again. "All right." Jonah placed the folded bills on the desk. "First week." Amos slid them back halfway. "Payday's Friday." Jonah nodded. He took the bills back and folded them into his pocket. He didn't argue. As they turned to leave, the door opened. Silas Thornton stepped in like he owned the air. Gloves clean, coat pressed, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well," Thornton said, "this is neighborly." Jonah didn't speak. Thornton's gaze flicked to Evelyn, then to Noah, lingering just a breath too long. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "At your age." Evelyn met his eyes. "Law doesn't list ages," she said. Thornton chuckled. "No," he said, "but winter does." Jonah stepped between them. "Anything you need, Mr. Thornton?" Thornton's smile thinned. "Just curious," he said. "Accidents happen easy this time of year." The sheriff's pen paused. Evelyn spoke before Jonah could. "So does evidence," she said. Thornton's eyes narrowed, then widened with polite surprise. "Of course," he said. "Just conversation." He tipped his hat and left. Amos exhaled. "You're stirring something," he said. Jonah nodded. "We know." They rode back as the light faded, the sky going the hard blue that meant cold would come sharp. At the ranch, Jonah moved without comment. He shifted oil lamps away from the walls. He set water barrels full and close. He checked the barn roof, tapping boards with his knuckles. Evelyn watched, then joined him, moving straw away from the door, stacking it tighter, safer. Noah fussed once. She lifted him, pressed him to her chest, and hummed low. The sound steadied her own breath. "Stay inside tonight," Jonah said. Evelyn shook her head. "I'll watch the door." Jonah didn't argue. He set a chair by the barn and another by the house. They didn't say what they were waiting for. Night came down heavy. Somewhere beyond the fence, a match struck, or didn't. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the knife beneath Noah's blanket. Jonah's hand rested near his belt, not on a gun, on the space where restraint lived. Christmas was close enough to feel, and the ranch stood, lit from within, daring the dark to try. The sound came first. Not loud, not close, just enough to pull Jonah from the thin edge of sleep where men pretend rest still counts. Hooves, 5 of them, measured, unhurried. Jonah rose from the chair by the barn and stepped into the cold, breath smoking once before he stilled it. The sky was barely awake, a pale strip lifting over the ridge like a blade sliding free. They crested the rise together, 5 riders, dust hanging low behind them, as if the ground itself didn't want to let them pass. Coats dark, hats low. The kind of men who didn't need to shout because they expected the world to listen anyway. Evelyn was already at the door, Noah wrapped tight, eyes sharp. She didn't ask what he saw. She knew. Jonah walked forward until the fence line cut between them. The lead rider swung down, boots landing easy, confident. His smile showed no warmth. "Morning," he said. "Name's Garrett." Jonah didn't offer his. "You're on my land." Garrett glanced around, slow and casual, like he was pricing lumber. "Mr. Thornton sent us," he said. "Said to have a look." Evelyn stepped out then, stopping a few paces behind Jonah. She didn't hide. She didn't advance. She stood where she could be seen and counted. Garrett's eyes slid to her, then to the baby. Something like calculation flickered and went dark again. "Dry season," Garrett continued. "Fires start easy. Accidents happen." Jonah's voice stayed level. "So do hangings." Garrett chuckled. You threatening me? No, Jonah replied. I'm naming the law. The other riders shifted in their saddles. Leather creaked. A match appeared between Garrett's fingers, struck once and blown out, just to show it could be done. Evelyn moved. Not fast, not dramatic. She stepped to Jonah's side and spoke as if she were correcting a sum. Threatening arson carries a rope in this county, she said. 5 witnesses would be 4 too many for the man who sent you. Garrett looked at her, surprised enough to forget his smile. You think an old woman. I think, Evelyn said calmly, that men who plan violence don't announce it. They leave evidence, and men who lend money hate evidence. Silence stretched. The wind moved through dry grass. Noah stirred, a small sound against Evelyn's chest. She tightened her hold without looking down. Garrett spat once, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. This isn't over, he said. Jonah nodded. It is for today. The riders turned. Hooves struck dirt. Dust lifted again and drifted back toward them like a warning left unfinished. Jonah exhaled only after they were gone. Deputy Luke Banner burst from the tree line then, young and tight, hand already on his revolver. You want me to ride after them? He asked. We can catch. No, Jonah said. Luke stared. They threatened. I know what they did, Jonah cut in. And I know what you'd do next, Luke bristled. You letting them walk? I'm making them visible, Jonah replied. Evelyn turned to Luke. If you shoot them, she said, they become shadows. If you let them leave, they become witnesses. Luke hesitated. The idea took hold slow, like a nail bent wrong. They'll come back, he said. Yes, Evelyn replied, and when they do, they'll bring proof with them. Luke lowered his hand, jaw tight. Sheriff won't like this. Jonah nodded. Sheriff will understand it. Luke mounted and rode hard toward town, dust tearing loose behind him. Evelyn watched him go. Her hands were steady. Her pulse was not. Lord, she thought, not daring to close her eyes, keep the fire out of this house. They didn't wait. Jonah saddled up again and helped Evelyn onto the smaller horse, careful of Noah, careful of her balance. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. They rode for town while the day was still theirs to claim. Sheriff Rourke listened without interruption. He asked for details. He asked for names. He wrote as Evelyn spoke, her words clean, her timing exact. She didn't dramatize. She didn't plead. Any witnesses? Amos asked. Evelyn nodded. Ruth Calder, she said. She was near enough to hear before. Amos sighed. I'll talk to her. Jonah leaned forward. You'll put it on record, he said. Today. Amos met his gaze. You're pushing. I'm staying alive, Jonah replied. The sheriff set his pen down. All right, he said. I'll patrol, and I'll make noise. That helps, Evelyn said, but it won't stop him. Amos raised a brow. Then what will? Evelyn answered without looking at Jonah. Witnesses who won't disappear. They left the office and crossed the street to the small print shop that smelled of ink and iron. Mr. Harlan Fitch looked up from his press, eyes sharpening. I want to put something on paper, Evelyn said. Before night. Fitch glanced at Jonah, then back to her. Name? She gave it. Details? He asked. All of them, she replied. By the time they rode back, the sky was already hardening again. The ranch waited. So did the dark. They prepared without speaking. Water barrels came closer to the barn. Straw moved away from walls. Lamps were set where they could be seen and nowhere else. Jonah took the first watch outside. Evelyn took the door. Noah slept between them, breath deep and steady, the small miracle of it not lost on either of them. The night tested the house. Wind, cold, the sound of something moving where it shouldn't. At one point, Jonah smelled smoke. He didn't run. He followed it, slow and quiet, until he found the source, a neighbor's brush pile burning low, watched by no one. He stamped it out himself. When he came back, Evelyn was standing just inside the door, knife in hand, Noah tight against her. "False," Jonah said. She nodded. She didn't lower the knife right. Away. They stood there, the firelight painting them in uneven gold. Jonah spoke without turning. "You should leave," he said, "before this gets worse." Evelyn didn't answer at once. Then she did, voice steady as the lock beneath her hand. "Not tonight." Jonah closed his eyes for a single breath. "I could have left," he thought. "I didn't." Outside, the ranch held. Inside, a door remained locked from the inside. And for the first time since winter set its teeth, the darkness did not cross the threshold. Christmas was close now, and mercy, hard-earned, was being kept alive by watchful hands. For a week, nothing happened. That was how Jonah knew it wasn't over. No riders on the ridge, no smoke at dawn, no strangers asking the wrong questions in town. Just work, steady and unglamorous, and the kind of silence that sharpened instead of soothed. Jonah rose before light and checked the barn, then the fence, then the barrels. He counted water by touch, hay by weight, boards by sound. The ranch answered him back with creaks and groans and held. Evelyn kept the ledger. She wrote at the table by the window, Noah sleeping against her side, the pencil moving in clean lines that didn't waste ink. Wages recorded, supplies tallied, receipts folded and stacked. She pinned each one with a small nail above the shelf, in plain sight. If anyone came looking, there would be nothing to hide. Once Jonah watched her write and thought of rooms he used to know, lamplight and quiet, the smell of paper instead of hay. The thought hurt, so he drove a nail and let the hammer ring. At noon, Deputy Luke Banner rode up, reins loose, eyes scanning. "Sheriff's making noise," Luke said. "Questions in town." Ruth Calder talked. Jonah nodded. "Good." Luke hesitated. "Mr. Thornton's not pleased." Evelyn didn't look up. "Men like that never are." Luke watched Noah for a beat, then cleared his throat. "You keep the lamps low," he said, "and the barrels full." Jonah answered for both of them, always. Luke rode off. Dust settled. The week stretched. The ranch kept breathing. By the 8th day, pressure came wearing clean gloves. A man from the bank stopped by, hat in hand, voice smooth. "Just checking records," he said. "Routine." Evelyn handed him the ledger, opened it herself, let him read. He found nothing to bite. A second man came from the feed supplier, smiling too wide. "Prices rising," he said. "Could lock in now." Jonah paid in cash, took the receipt, pinned it. Word reached them that a fence 2 miles east had burned overnight. No witnesses, no charges. Evelyn pressed Noah closer when she heard. She did not say that could be us. She set another bucket by the door. That evening, Jonah found her at the table, staring at a blank page. "What is it?" he asked. "Timing," she said. "They're waiting for us to get tired." Jonah nodded. "We won't." She looked up at him then, searching. "You sure?" He answered with action. He took the bucket and filled it again. He moved straw farther away. He checked the lock she checked after him. "Lord," he thought, "keep me steady." On the 10th day, Silas Thornton came himself. He didn't ride up loud. He didn't bring company. He walked through the gate like a man stepping into a parlor, gloves spotless, smile practiced. Jonah met him halfway, fence between them. "Mr. Creed," Thornton said, "thought I'd call neighbor to neighbor." Evelyn stepped to Jonah's side with Noah. She didn't retreat. She didn't advance. Thornton's gaze slid to her and paused, just long enough to insult. "Still here," he said. Evelyn answered without heat. "Still paid." Thornton chuckled. "I admire enterprise," he said. "I'd hate to see it ruined by misunderstandings." Jonah's voice stayed level. "You have business?" Thornton tapped the fence post with one gloved finger. "Sell me the south pasture," he said. "Good price. Avoid trouble." "No," Jonah replied. Thornton's smile thinned. "Think on it." Evelyn spoke then. "We already have." Thornton's eyes flicked to her. "At your age," he said softly, "security matters." Evelyn didn't blink. "So does daylight." Thornton laughed once, sharp. "We'll see." He turned and walked away without another word. Jonah didn't move until Thornton was gone. Evelyn exhaled. Noah stirred. She rocked him, slow and sure. "That was him choosing," she said. Jonah nodded. "Yes." They rode to town before dusk. Sheriff Rourke listened again, jaw set tighter this time. He took down Thornton's words, exact as Evelyn gave them. "Any proof?" Amos asked. Evelyn placed the ledger on the desk, then the receipts, then a small folded paper, notes of dates and times, written neat. "Pattern," she said, "and witnesses if you ask." Amos rubbed his face. "I can't arrest on tone." "I'm not asking you to," Evelyn replied. "I'm asking you to watch." Amos nodded. "I will." They crossed to the print shop again. Mr. Fitch didn't smile this time. "I'll print facts," he said. "Names if you stand by them." Evelyn did. Jonah did. Ink pressed into paper. Paper into daylight. By nightfall, the story had legs. They returned to the ranch under a sky bruised purple. Noah slept. Evelyn carried him inside and checked the lock. Jonah took first watch. Hours passed. At some point, Evelyn joined him by the door. She didn't bring the knife this time. She brought a lantern. "You don't have to," Jonah said. She lifted the lantern. "I choose to." They stood together, light pooled at their feet. "I could have left," Jonah said quietly. It slipped out before he could stop it. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She set the lantern down where it could be seen from the yard. "I stayed," she said. "That's what matters." The wind shifted. A sound moved at the edge of hearing, then faded. No fire came that night. But neither of them slept. By morning, the ledger held another line. The barrels were still full. The locks still turned from the inside. And somewhere beyond the fence, a man with clean gloves counted his options and found them narrowing. Weeks passed like water over stone, slow, shaping everything. The fence stood straighter now. Not pretty, true. The barn roof no longer sagged where it had learned to give up. Jonah replaced boards one by one, choosing sound wood, seating nails flush, the work honest enough to keep the wind out and the truth in. Evelyn made the house efficient. She moved the table closer to the window for light, hung the ledger where anyone could see it, marked jars with chalk, counted feed and measured out meals the way a careful person measures prayers. Never too much, never careless. Noah changed in small ways that mattered. His cries grew strong enough to argue with the cold. His hands opened and closed with purpose. Once, when Evelyn laid him down, he caught her finger and held it like a promise he hadn't learned to break. Jonah saw that and turned back to the fence before the sight could cost him something. The ranch breathed. Animals settled. Work held. That was when the pressure shifted. Jonah found the tracks just after noon. Not deep, not hurried. A man walking careful so he wouldn't be noticed. The prints circled the hay shed once, twice, then disappeared into the brush. Jonah crouched and touched the dirt. Fresh. He didn't call out. He didn't chase. He went back to the house and filled another barrel, moved another stack of straw, checked the lamps and set them farther from the walls. Evelyn watched him do it and said nothing until he finished. "They're measuring," she said. Jonah nodded. "They'll try the quiet way first." Evelyn shifted Noah on her hip. "Quiet leaves less proof." "Unless we're ready," Jonah replied. She considered, then nodded. "Then we make quiet loud." She went to the table and added a line to the ledger. Extra water barrels. Extra lamp oil removed. She pinned it where anyone could read it. Jonah caught her meaning and allowed himself one breath of relief. The next day, a stranger came asking questions. He said he was looking for work. He said he'd heard Jonah needed hands. Jonah stood in the yard and studied him. Boots too new, eyes too busy. "No openings," Jonah said. The man's gaze flicked to the barn, to the hay, to the house. "Shame," he said. "Times are hard." "They always are," Jonah replied. The man lingered, then left. That night, Evelyn found a rag soaked with oil tucked behind a fence post where it couldn't be seen from the road. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She placed it in a tin, sealed it, and wrote the date and time on the lid. Jonah watched her hands, steady and sure. "We take this in," she said. "Yes," Jonah replied. Noah slept through it all, breath deep, unaware of how thin the line had become. They rode to town with the tin between them, the proof quiet and damning. Sheriff Rourke didn't argue this time. He took the tin, sniffed once, and closed the lid. "That's intent," Amos said. "Not an accident." Evelyn nodded. "We know." Amos looked at Jonah. "You want protection?" "I want eyes," Jonah replied. "You'll have them," Amos said. "But understand, this will stir." Evelyn met his gaze. "It already has." They stopped at the print shop on the way out. Mr. Fitch took the tin, photographed it, wrote a paragraph that did not exaggerate and did not soften. Facts on paper, paper in daylight. By dusk, the town knew the word arson had been spoken aloud. They doubled watches that night. Jonah took the barn. Evelyn took the door. Noah slept between shifts, waking only to feed, his strength a small rebellion against the cold. At one point, the wind carried a smell that made Jonah's spine tighten. He followed it and found nothing burning, just a neighbor's chimney coughing smoke into the dark. He stood there longer than necessary, listening for the sound that would mean everything had gone wrong. It didn't come. When he returned, Evelyn was standing just inside the door, lantern lifted. "You smell it too?" she asked. "Yes," Jonah said. They stood together, light pooling at their feet, neither stepping closer nor farther away. "I can't promise safety," Jonah said, the words heavy. Evelyn's answer came without pause. "I didn't ask for promises." She set the lantern on the table where it could be seen through the window. An open declaration. If anyone was watching, they would see light. No fire came that night. But somewhere beyond the ridge, a man with clean gloves realized the quiet ways were failing, and the ranch, stubborn and alive, kept breathing into the cold. The barn loft smelled of old hay and winter. Evelyn climbed the ladder with Noah settled in the crate below, bundled and sleeping, the sun a pale coin on the dirt. She moved careful, weight placed where wood looked sound, fingers brushing beams the way you greet a stranger, polite, alert. She reached the loft and knelt to check the stores, counting bales, listening to the barn talk back in creaks and sighs. One plank near the edge looked darker than the rest. She tested it with her palm. It held. She shifted her weight. It didn't. The sound was quick and wrong, a crack like a snapped rib. The world dropped out from under her feet. Evelyn fell. Her hands caught a beam by instinct, splinters biting deep into skin. Pain flashed white. Her body swung out into the open space, breath ripped from her chest. Hay dust burst up and filled her mouth. "Jonah!" The name tore free before she could stop it. Below, Jonah looked up and saw her hanging there, arms shaking, fingers bleeding, the space beneath her wide enough to swallow a life. He didn't think. He moved. He hit the ladder, climbed fast, boots slipping, hands burning. He flattened himself on the loft floor and reached, stretching until his ribs pressed hard against the boards. "I've got you," he said. He said it once, then again. "I've got you." Evelyn's arms screamed. Her grip slid. Blood slicked the beam. Jonah caught her wrists and locked them in both hands, fingers digging in, teeth clenched so hard his jaw shook. He pulled. She kicked against nothing, then found the ladder with her heel. Together, they hauled. Evelyn came over the edge and collapsed onto the boards, gasping, dust in her hair, pain lighting her arms like fire. Jonah wrapped his arms around her without asking, holding on as if the barn itself had tried to take her and failed. Below them, Noah cried, sharp, furious, alive. They sat on the loft floor, backs against the wall, breath coming hard. Jonah didn't let go. He didn't know how to. His hands shook where they pressed into her shoulders, like he was afraid the world might tilt again. "God," he whispered into her hair. "I thought—" He stopped. He couldn't finish it. The rest of the sentence was a grave he had already dug once. Evelyn felt his fear the way you feel heat from a stove, too close to ignore. She lifted one hand, winced, and set it on his arm. "I'm here," she said. Not soothing, anchoring. Jonah pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were raw, open, the kind of open he had sworn off. "I can't do that again," he said, voice rough. "I can't lose." He swallowed. His hands loosened, as if he were catching himself crossing a line. "You don't have to say anything," he added quickly. "I just needed you to know." Evelyn breathed. She looked at her bleeding palms, then at him. "I know," she said. Below, Noah's crying turned hoarse. Evelyn pushed herself up despite the pain and started down the ladder. Jonah followed, one hand hovering near her back without touching. She scooped Noah up and pressed him to her chest, rocking until the small body settled, breath evening out. Jonah watched her do it, chest tight, the barn suddenly too small. "I could have left," he thought. "I stayed." Night came early. Evelyn washed her hands, wincing as water bit into the cuts. Jonah bandaged them with care that was all concentration and no ceremony. He tied the cloth firm, then let go as if he feared what holding longer might mean. They sat by the fire. Noah slept between them, the blue cloth rising and falling. Jonah stared into the flames. "You should leave," he said again, softer than before this takes more than it's owed. Evelyn didn't answer at once. She reached into her pocket and took out the keys. She set them on the table where the firelight caught them. Then she picked them up and locked the door. From the inside. She met Jonah's eyes. "Not tonight," she said. The words landed like a vow without the trappings. Jonah's throat worked. He leaned forward, hands braced on his knees, and spoke low, like he was afraid the night might hear him. "Stay with me." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a claim. It was a request stripped down to bone. Evelyn looked at Noah. She looked at the door. She looked at Jonah. She didn't answer with words. She pulled the ledger toward her and wrote a single line beneath the day's work. "Tomorrow, fence, east side." Jonah watched the pencil move. He nodded once as if something had been decided that didn't need naming. Outside, the wind pressed at the walls and moved on. The house held. Sleep came in pieces. Jonah took the chair by the door again. Evelyn lay near the hearth with Noah tucked against her, one hand resting over the bandage on her palm. At some point, Jonah smelled smoke. He was on his feet before the thought finished forming, boots silent on the floor. He opened the door a crack and scanned the yard. Nothing burned. The smell drifted, thinned, vanished. A neighbor's chimney, or a trick of fear. He closed the door and locked it. Evelyn opened her eyes. "False," he said. She nodded. She didn't ask more. They watched the night together, not touching, not separate. By morning, frost traced the windows again. The barn stood. The house stood. The ledger waited. Evelyn flexed her bandaged hands and reached for her coat. Jonah stood, tired and steady. "We'll move the bad boards today," he said. "Yes," she replied. Below the ridge, a man with clean gloves would hear about the fall and smile until he realized it hadn't taken. The ranch breathed, and the line between staying and belonging had been crossed, quiet as a door locking from the inside. Morning broke hard and pale, the kind that made every mistake stand out. Jonah found it behind the hayshed, a strip of cloth stuffed low between boards, dark and wet, smelling sharp enough to sting the back of his throat. Oil. Fresh. He didn't curse. He didn't shout. He stood there a long moment, breathing through his nose, letting the truth settle into place the way a stone settles into a boot. Then he took the tin from the shelf and lifted the cloth with 2 fingers, careful not to smear a thing. He sealed it. Tight. Evelyn watched from the doorway, Noah on her hip, eyes tracking every move. "They're done talking," she said. Jonah nodded. "Yes." She didn't ask what he planned. She stepped back inside and brought out the ledger, already open to a blank page. She wrote the date, the time, the place. Jonah set the tin beside the entry and moved straw farther from the walls, carrying armfuls until his shoulders burned. He stacked water where it could be reached in the dark. He checked the lamps and carried them out, one by one, setting them where fire would have to work too hard to matter. Evelyn adjusted Noah's blanket and pressed her cheek to his hair. "Lord," she thought, "not today." The man came near noon. He didn't ride in loud. He didn't carry trouble on his face. He smiled like a clerk and stopped just shy of the gate. "Afternoon," he said. "Heard you might need help." Jonah stepped between him and the yard. "No openings." The man's eyes slid past Jonah to the house, to Evelyn, to Noah. "Shame," he said. "Cute boy." Evelyn's grip tightened. She shifted so Noah's body was shielded by her shoulder. "He's not for sale," Jonah said. The man laughed softly. "Everything's for sale. Some things just cost more." Evelyn spoke then, voice level. "Leave." The man's smile faded. He took a step back, hands raised in mock surrender. "Just asking," he said. "No harm meant." Jonah didn't answer. The man walked away slow, as if memorizing the land. When he was gone, Evelyn exhaled and leaned a fraction against the doorframe. "They'll try to take him," she said. Jonah nodded once. "They won't." They didn't wait for night. Jonah saddled up and helped Evelyn mount, careful of her hands. He placed Noah against her chest himself, checking the wrap twice before stepping back. They rode straight to town, dust lifting behind them like a trail meant to be followed. Sheriff Rourke took the tin without comment. He smelled it, jaw setting hard. "That's arson," he said. "Intent." Evelyn placed the ledger on the desk, open to the page she'd written. "And this is pattern." Amos flipped pages, receipts, dates, notes. He closed the book slow. "I'll put eyes on your place tonight," he said, "more than usual." "That helps," Jonah said. "But we need daylight." Amos met Evelyn's gaze. "What do you want?" She answered without hesitation. "The truth, on paper." They crossed the street to the print shop. Mr. Fitch listened, pen moving fast, questions sharp but fair. "You sure?" he asked. "Names bring storms." Evelyn nodded. "Storms are already here." Ink pressed into paper, paper stacked to dry. By afternoon, the word arson had weight in town. They returned to the ranch before dark. Deputy Luke Banner was already there, horse-tied, eyes alert. He nodded once to Jonah. "Sheriff sent me." Jonah nodded back. "Good." They set watches, Jonah at the barn, Luke near the shed, Evelyn at the door. Noah slept in short stretches, waking to feed, then settling again. Each time he breathed easy, Evelyn felt something in her chest loosen just enough to hurt. The night tested them. A shadow moved near the fence. Luke called once. It vanished. A smell drifted on the wind. Jonah followed it and found nothing burning, just a trick of air. He stood longer than necessary, listening for the sound that would end everything. It didn't come. Near midnight, Jonah heard the scrape, a foot against wood. Too careful to be accidental. He lifted the lantern and stepped out, heart steady, hand open. "Sheriff," he called, loud enough to carry. Silence answered. Then a shape bolted from the far side of the shed. Luke ran it down fast, tackling hard, the two of them hitting dirt with a grunt and a curse. A rag fell free and rolled, soaking the ground with oil. Jonah knelt and picked it up with the lantern held high. "Got it," he said. They bound the man's hands and marched him toward the road, the lantern light making a path no one could pretend not to see. Evelyn watched from the doorway. Noah pressed tight, knife resting under the blanket where her fingers could find it if the world asked too much. When Jonah returned, dirt on his knees, eyes bright with the edge of it, she didn't speak. She set the lantern on the table where it shone through the window. The door stayed locked from the inside. Jonah sat at last, breath slowing. "They won't try quiet again," he said. Evelyn nodded. "Then we won't be quiet either." Noah stirred and made a small sound, indignant at being woken. Evelyn kissed his hair. "Stay," Jonah said again, not pleading, not commanding. Evelyn met his eyes. "I am." Outside, the ranch stood lit and stubborn. The night passed without flame, and somewhere in town, a man with clean gloves would learn that quiet had failed, and loud was coming. The knock came with the weather. Hard rain, driven sideways, slapped the boards and filled the dark with noise that hid smaller sounds. Footsteps, breath, fear. Evelyn heard the knock anyway. She always did now. 3 raps, too quick, too close together. Jonah was already up, lantern in hand. He didn't open the door. He lifted the light and stood where he could be seen through the window. "Who is it?" he called. A voice answered, thin and breaking. "Please, I can't go back." Evelyn stepped beside him, Noah tight against her, and unlocked the door before Jonah could stop her. She didn't throw it wide. She opened just enough to see a girl barely standing on the porch, hair plastered to her face, dress torn at the hem, eyes wild with the kind of panic that didn't come from the rain. "Come in," Evelyn said. The girl stumbled forward and nearly fell. Jonah caught her elbow and guided her inside, then shut the door and turned the key. The girl sagged to the floor, breath hitching, hands shaking so hard they rattled against the boards. "They said I owed," she gasped. "They said I had to work it off." Evelyn knelt and set the lantern down. "Name," she said. Calm, anchoring. "Sarah," the girl whispered. "Sarah Pike." Noah stirred at the sound. Evelyn pressed him closer and rocked once, twice, then looked back at Sarah. "Who sent you?" Jonah asked. Sarah swallowed. "Mr. Thornton." The name landed and stayed. They wrapped Sarah in a dry blanket and sat her by the fire. Jonah poured water. Evelyn watched the girl's hands, bruises blooming beneath the skin, wrists marked where someone had gripped too hard. "Sheriff," Jonah said. "Now." Sarah's head snapped up. "No," she said too fast. "He owns people. He owns paper. If I go back, you won't," Evelyn said. She held Sarah's gaze until the shaking slowed. "But we do this right." Jonah hesitated. He knew what right cost. "Doc Kent first," Evelyn continued. "Tonight, then paper." Sarah looked between them, searching for the trick. "Why?" she asked. Evelyn answered without softening it. "Because daylight keeps people alive." Noah fussed. Evelyn shifted him and checked his breath. She nodded to Jonah. Jonah pulled on his coat. "I'll saddle," he said. The rain eased as if it had done its part. Doc Kent didn't ask questions that would scare Sarah away. She checked bruises, measured breath, wrote notes with a steady hand. "Coercion," she said finally. "Threats. Assault." She signed her name and sealed the page. Evelyn watched the pen scratch and felt the weight lift just enough to hurt. They crossed to the print shop next. Mr. Fitch looked up once and saw the girl's face, the way fear had etched itself there. "I'll write what's provable," he said. Sarah told her story in pieces that fit together like broken glass. Mr. Fitch wrote. Evelyn corrected dates. Jonah stood by the door, lantern held high. When it was done, the paper lay flat and dangerous. "Sheriff," Jonah said. They found Amos Rourke still at his desk, eyes rimmed red from long days. He read once, then again. "Where is he now?" Amos asked. "Here," Jonah replied. "Under our roof." Amos nodded. "Good." By morning, the town had woken to words it couldn't unsee. Men whispered. Women stopped whispering. Names sat on paper where money couldn't rub them out. Silas Thornton arrived before noon, anger polished into courtesy. He didn't knock. Jonah met him at the fence again. Evelyn stood a step behind, Sarah on the porch with Noah, rapt and steady. "This is a misunderstanding," Thornton said, voice smooth. "I help families." Evelyn spoke. "You buy fear." Thornton's eyes flicked to Sarah. "She's confused." Sarah stepped forward, hands trembling, but voice clear. "You threatened my mother." The sheriff's wagon rolled up behind Thornton then, dust settling slow. Amos climbed down. "Mr. Thornton," he said. "I'll need a word." Thornton smiled thin. "On what grounds?" Amos held up the paper. "These." Thornton's smile slipped. The arrest didn't come clean or quick. Thornton argued. He threatened. He promised. It didn't matter. When they took him away, he turned his head once, eyes finding Evelyn. "You'll lose everything," he said softly. Evelyn met his gaze. "I already lost it," she replied. "I chose what came next." The wagon rolled. Sarah sank onto the step, breath breaking loose at last. Evelyn sat beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. Noah reached out and caught Sarah's finger. The girl laughed, a small sound that startled her. Jonah watched them and felt the line he'd crossed weeks ago settle into place. Lord, he thought, thank you for daylight. The ranch stood behind them, wet and breathing, proof that fire had not won. And for the first time since winter began, the danger had a face the law could see, and hands bound where they could do no more harm. The hearing wasn't held in a courtroom. It was held in daylight. A long table in the sheriff's office. Papers stacked where everyone could see them. Ink still fresh. Names written full, no initials to hide behind. Amos Rourke sat at the head, hat off, eyes steady. Doc Kent stood to one side with her notes. Mr. Fitch leaned against the wall, pressman's ink on his fingers. Deputy Luke waited near the door. Thornton was brought in last. His gloves were gone. He looked smaller without them, hands bare on the table, rings catching the light like they wanted attention they wouldn't get. Jonah stood straight, hat in hand. He didn't speak. Evelyn placed the ledger on the table and opened it. She turned pages slow, letting the room see dates, figures, patterns that didn't care who you were. This isn't a mistake, she said. It's a method. Sarah spoke next. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. She named threats. She named nights. She named promises that turned into cages. Thornton smiled once, thin. Stories, he said. Girls get ideas. Amos lifted a page and set it down in front of him. This one's not a story, he said. It's intent. The tin hit the table with a soft, final sound. Oil, cloth, fingerprints. Thornton's smile broke. They should have ended it there. They didn't. The shout came from outside, sharp, urgent. Smoke curled low at the edge of the yard like a question nobody wanted to answer. Jonah moved first. He ran. The shed behind the office was already burning at one corner, flame licking up where a lantern had been set too close to stacked boards. A man broke from the shadows and bolted, panic louder than his boots. Luke went after him and caught him hard, the two of them rolling into the dirt. The lantern fell and shattered. Fire jumped. Jonah grabbed sand with both hands and threw it. Then again, then again. Amos and Fitch joined him, stamping, smothering, cursing the wind. Someone brought water. Someone else brought more sand. The fire fought. It lost. They dragged the man back, clothes scorched, eyes wide, the truth sweating out of him. He talked fast, words tripping over each other, naming names he'd sworn he never would. Thornton watched from the doorway, face draining of color. That's enough, Amos said. He turned to Thornton. You're under arrest. Thornton laughed, brittle. For what? For all of it, Amos said. And for thinking you were quiet. Thornton's gaze cut to Evelyn then, sharp as a blade. You'll be alone again, he said. Men don't stay. Jonah stepped between them without raising his voice. She didn't ask you, he said. Thornton was taken out with hands bound and words left behind that no longer mattered. Outside, the air smelled of wet ash and morning. Evelyn closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, the world was still there. Thank you, she thought, for daylight. Back at the ranch, they worked without ceremony. They moved the last of the dry straw. They checked every lamp. They washed the soot from their hands and the fear from their throats. Sarah sat at the table and signed her name on a paper that made her work legal and her wages real. She took the pen like it was something alive. Noah crawled and fell and crawled again, indignant at the interruption. Evelyn laughed once, surprised by the sound. Jonah fixed the latch on the back door and tested it twice. He left the key on the table where it could be seen. Evelyn picked it up and put it in her pocket. She didn't ask permission. Jonah watched and nodded. They stood on the porch as the sun dipped low, the land stretching quiet and honest in front of them. "I won't ask again," Jonah said. "Not like that." Evelyn looked at him, then at the fields, then at Sarah reading by the window with Noah asleep at her feet. "You already did," she said. He waited. "I stayed," she added. That was enough. The wind moved through the grass and went on. The house held, and the ranch, scarred but standing, took its first full breath of spring. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It tested the ground first. Green pushed through where frost had learned bad habits. Water ran clearer. Fence lines cast straighter shadows at noon. The barn roof held its shape through a week of rain that would have finished it a month earlier. Jonah worked without hurry now, the kind of work that knows it will be here tomorrow. He replaced one hinge, then another, and stopped to watch Noah take 3 uneven steps before sitting hard in the dirt and grinning like he'd won something. Evelyn counted feed and wrote less often. When she did write, it was lighter. Notes instead of warnings. She hung laundry where the wind could reach it and didn't flinch when a gust snapped the line. She tied it again and let it be. Sarah learned the place by touch, how to open the gate without noise, how to read the sky, how to take wages on Friday and say thank you without bending. The ranch didn't feel saved. It felt kept. Jonah waited until evening. He didn't gather people. He didn't make a speech. He called Evelyn to the porch and set a small parcel on the rail between them. She didn't open it right away. "Go on," he said. Not urging, inviting. Inside was a simple silver band, warm from his pocket. 3 marks were worked into it. Rough, honest. A fence post standing true, a lantern with its door open, and a small spoon no longer bent. Evelyn touched the metal with her thumb. She understood. "I made it," Jonah said, "so you'd know what I meant." She didn't cry. She breathed. "It's not a claim," he added. "It's a thanks. And a place." Evelyn slid the band onto her wrist and closed her hand once, feeling the weight settle where it belonged. "Then I'll keep it," she said. Jonah nodded. That was all he needed. The paper came next. Not flowers. Not vows. Jonah set it on the table with the good pen, the one that didn't skip. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Evelyn read it through once, then again. She signed her name clean and full, the way she always had when names meant doors. Noah banged the table with his palm and laughed at the sound. Jonah lifted the boy, careful and sure, and Noah grabbed his collar like he'd done it all his life. "Samuel," Jonah said, soft. "If you want." Evelyn nodded. "Samuel," she echoed. The name settled into the room and stayed. Sarah wiped her eyes and pretended she hadn't. That night, the lantern went up on the porch. Not for show, for practice. Jonah lit it and stepped back. The glow reached the yard and stopped. It didn't beg the dark to come closer. It simply said where the house was. Evelyn locked the door from the inside and set the key on the hook where it belonged. She didn't check it twice. Noah slept through the quiet, breath deep and unafraid. Jonah stood by the window and watched the fields turn silver under the moon. He didn't think about leaving. I could have left, he remembered. I didn't. Evelyn came to stand beside him, wrist warm with metal, shoulder easy against his arm. Stay, he said again, not asking this time. She smiled, small, certain. I am. Outside, the ranch held its light, and in the season that followed winter's long question, a home answered. By choice, by work, by grace kept alive through the dark. Spring came gently to the ranch, the way it does when a place has learned how to endure. The fences stood straight, the lantern burned steady, and the house no longer listened for footsteps in the dark. What had begun with shame and silence ended with something stronger than hope. Belonging earned, not given. She was never too old to matter. She had only lived in a world that forgot how to see. And when one man chose fairness over fear and work over pity, a life that had been pushed aside found its way home. Not through promises, but through daily choices. Wages paid honestly, doors locked from the inside, hands held when the past came back too loud. This story isn't about miracles that fall from the sky. It's about the quiet courage to stay, to trust again, and to believe that God still writes new chapters, even later in life. Especially later in life. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like the video. It helps these stories reach others who may need them. Subscribe to the channel for more Western love tales of faith, resilience, and second chances. And we'd truly love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments what city you're watching from, and if you've ever seen hope arrive when you thought it was too late. Your story still matters.